What do you get when Hollywood's most unpredictable star goes toe-to-toe with late night's most relentless interviewer? What unfolded was a television moment like no other, the kind that leaves audiences stunned and has the entire entertainment world talking. Tonight, we're diving into the unforgettable showdown between Johnny Depp and Jimmy Kimmel, a moment that quickly spiraled into one of the most talked-about talk show clashes in recent memory. Think you've got the full picture? You might want to think again. What really happened during that interview sheds light on a version of Jimmy Kimmel that network execs probably hoped would never come to light. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share your take in the comments. Who do you think crossed the line? The evening started off like any other night at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio in downtown Los Angeles. There was a buzz of energy in the air as the crowd waited excitedly for none other than Johnny Depp to appear. Known for his magnetic charm and thoughtful approach to interviews, Depp was there to promote his latest film, a role that many critics were already calling the comeback of his career. But what was supposed to be a routine promotional stop quickly turned into something much more revealing. Not just about Johnny, but about the darker undercurrent of late-night television itself. Johnny walked out to a wave of applause, dressed in that unmistakable, offbeat fashion he's known for. He smiled and gave a few friendly waves as he made his way to the chair. First, things seemed fine. Kimmel greeted him with his usual on-screen energy, kicking things off by mentioning Depp's new movie. But for those really paying attention, there was something off. Kimmel's grin didn't quite feel genuine, and there was a strange tension in his voice. "Johnny, welcome back to the show," Kimmel said, leaning in with a smile that felt more like a challenge than a warm welcome. "Been what, 3 years since you were last on this couch?" Depp nodded, settling into the chair with his usual laid-back grace. "Yeah, I think it's been around that long, Jimmy. Appreciate you having me back." 3 years is a while, Kimmel went on, his tone shifting just slightly. "A lot can go down in that amount of time, especially in your world." The crowd chuckled, but not in the usual way. There was a weird tension to it, like they could already tell this wasn't going to be your standard, friendly interview. Depp, ever the professional, kept his cool and smiled politely. "Life's full of twists, that's for sure. But I'm happy to be here and talk about the work. This film really meant a lot to all of us who worked on it." But Kimmel didn't seem all that interested in talking about the film. He brushed Johnny's comment aside with a wave of his hand, almost like it was a formality he had to get through. "Yeah, the movie, we'll get to that," he said. "But first, I think people would love to hear about some of the, let's say, more headline-making parts of your life lately." The camera caught Depp's reaction. A flicker of surprise, a flash of unease, before he smoothed it over and returned to that calm, collected presence he's known for. He's never been one to indulge in the celebrity gossip circuit. He usually keeps it about the craft. "I've always felt the work should speak for itself, Jimmy," he said. "It's the characters, the storytelling. That's what really matters to me." But Kimmel let out a short, almost mocking laugh that cut through the air. "Oh, come on, Johnny. We're all friends here, right? You can drop the whole mysterious artist bit. The folks at home want the real scoop." The energy in the room shifted. It wasn't playful anymore. Felt hostile. Kimmel wasn't just poking fun, he was pushing, almost daring Depp to lose his cool. Johnny shifted in his seat but kept his composure. "I'm not quite sure what you mean, Jimmy. I'm here to talk about the film, something I'm incredibly proud of. The entire team put their hearts into it." Right, Kimmel said, cutting him off and narrowing his eyes. "The one where you play the misunderstood loner again. Bit of a pattern there, wouldn't you say?" You could practically hear the audience hold their breath. Kimmel had stepped over a line that usually stays invisible in these kinds of interviews. Everyone in the room could feel it. The camera lingered on Depp as he stared back at Kimmel, his expression unreadable. "You know, Jimmy," he said quietly, every word deliberate, "I've always had respect for talk show hosts who create real conversations. It's kind of an art form when it's done right." He lingered on the word respect, a subtle but clear message. Kimmel noticed he didn't show it. "Speaking of art," he continued, flipping through his cue cards with exaggerated interest, "let's talk about your, let's say, less professional moments. I've heard some pretty solid claims that your tardiness on set cost a production millions. It landed like a good punch. The crowd was clearly uncomfortable now. People shifted in their seats, unsure if they should laugh or look away. Whatever this was, it didn't feel like a show anymore. It felt personal. Depp didn't flinch. His expression stayed steady, but you could see a hint of tiredness behind his eyes. I've had the privilege of working with some incredible directors and crews, he said. Every film set has its own pace, its own challenges. I've always tried to honor that rhythm. I would never intentionally throw that off. So you're saying those reports are false? Kimmel asked, leaning in like a prosecutor zeroing in on a witness. What I'm saying, Johnny replied, keeping his voice level, is maybe we'd all be better off focusing on the work, the creative process, rather than chasing unverified rumors. The tension was thick now. Nobody laughed. Nobody clapped. It was just silence, thick, uncomfortable silence, until Kimmel broke it with a forced chuckle and turned back to the crowd. Well, folks, he said, flashing that same smile, looks like he's not touching that one. Let's switch gears, shall we? The camera caught a quick, telling glance between Kimmel and one of his producers off to the side of the stage. Whatever passed between them didn't need words. You could just feel it, something was being decided in real time. But instead of backing off, Kimmel chose to press even harder. So Johnny, he said, with that same grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, let's chat about your, long-term relationship with certain substances. I think our viewers are pretty curious how a guy can live such a, let's call it, colorful lifestyle and still show up to work. And just like that, he stomped across yet another line, one that even the most jaded Hollywood insiders would call inappropriate for a public interview. There are these unspoken rules in celebrity sit-downs, a sort of silent contract between the guest and the host. That night, Kimmel seemed dead set on ripping up every single one of them. The air in the studio turned cold. Not literally, but you could feel the chill settle in as I looked back at him. I've been asked invasive questions before, comes with the territory, but this wasn't casual curiosity. This felt methodical. Like he was trying to provoke something. After a pause, I answered as calmly as I could. Jimmy, I said, I've always felt that what someone goes through in private should stay private. There are young people watching this show, people who might be facing their own struggles. What kind of message are we sending when we turn personal hardship into late-night entertainment? There was a small round of applause from somewhere in the audience, probably a few folks who appreciated the sentiment, but it faded fast when Kimmel shot them a sharp look. His face turned just a shade darker, clearly caught off guard by my refusal to take the bait. Well, isn't that convenient, he snapped, his smile stiffening. Dodged the question by hiding behind a noble cause. I mean, let's be real, I'm only asking what everyone's already thinking. The camera cut to the audience. You could see it on their faces, confusion, discomfort. This wasn't the playful back and forth people expect when they tune into late night. There was something else behind Kimmel's questions, something sharper, almost personal. I didn't realize I was hiding, I said, letting a little steel slip into my voice. I came on this show in good faith, ready to talk about a film that hundreds of talented people gave their all to. If you had these kinds of personal questions in mind, maybe you should have brought them up before I agreed to sit down with you. Kimmel laughed, but it was hollow. No joy in it. That's not how we get ratings, Johnny. People don't flip the channel for some indie flick. They want the juicy stuff, the drama. I turned slightly and looked out at the audience. For the first time that night, I spoke to them directly. Is that really what you want to hear? I asked. Or is that just what he wants to serve you? The question just hung there, dangling in the thick air. Some folks squirmed in their chairs. A few nodded quietly. You could feel the power dynamic in the room starting to shift. Without missing a beat, Kimmel looked straight into the camera and cut to commercial. We'll be right back with more from Johnny Depp, he said, with that polished, professional smile plastered back on his face. As soon as the red light on the camera blinked off, the set turned chaotic. Producers swarmed in. Makeup artists hurried over to dab our faces. Kimmel was in a huddle with his team, waving his arms, clearly heated. I stayed in my chair, passed on the water someone offered me, and just kept my eyes on him. My body was relaxed, but inside I was bracing. This wasn't over. When the cameras rolled again, Kimmel had that sparkly smile back in place, but his eyes told a different story. There was determination there now, like he had something to prove. Welcome back, everyone, he said cheerily. We're here with Johnny Depp, talking about his fascinating career choices. Actually, Jimmy, I said before he could keep going, we haven't talked about the film at all, have we? He brushed it off. Oh, right. The movie. Let's see. You play a troubled artist, haunted by personal demons and misunderstood by society. Stop me if you've heard this one before. He was mocking me, plain and simple. Some folks in the audience gave a nervous chuckle, but most just looked unsure of how to react. Every character's got their own truth, I said, keeping my tone steady. Seems like every interview has its own agenda, too. He caught that. I could see it land. His expression tightened for a split second, but he pushed through. Speaking of agendas, he said, rifling through his note cards, let's touch on that reputation you've got for being difficult on set. I've got a quote here from a director, won't say who said, and I quote, Johnny lives in a different reality than the rest of us. Thoughts? I raised an eyebrow. Mind telling me which director said that? Kimmel smirked. Can't say. Confidential source. Of course, I replied. Amazing how those anonymous sources always seem to have the most dramatic things to say. So, what, you think I made that up? He shot back, leaning in like he was trying to start something. I'm saying, I said carefully, that journalism, entertainment or otherwise, ought to be based on facts. But maybe late-night TV plays by its own set of rules. That one hit. A few people in the audience even gasped a little. Kimmel's known for throwing punches, but I don't think he expected someone to swing back. Let's move on, he said sharply, flipping through his cards. Your new movie deals with how people are seen by the public versus who they really are. Given your own situation with the media, do you find it ironic that you're playing someone fighting public opinion? Now on paper, that question might have seemed fair. But the way he said it? It was bait, pure and simple. Another trap dressed up like a thoughtful question. Not ironic, I said, thinking it over. If anything, it's kind of fitting. We all go through that disconnect between who we really are and how the world sees us. That space in between, well, that's where a lot of the most honest storytelling comes from. It's what gives art its meaning. For just a beat, Kimmel looked like he was caught off guard, maybe even a little moved. But whatever that moment was, it vanished as quickly as it came. He leaned right back into his routine. Sure, very deep, he said, the sarcasm barely hidden. But let's talk about what people really want to hear. There've been a lot of headlines about your, lifestyle choices. You spent $6 million on a cannon to shoot someone's ashes into the sky, bought a bunch of private islands, and your wine budget alone could probably cover a few mortgages. Care to comment? The tension in the studio hit a whole new level. Even his bandleader, who usually just played along with the vibe, glanced over nervously at the producer, who was now pacing just off stage, visibly concerned. I leaned in a little, lowered my voice, not to be dramatic, but to make sure Kimmel had to actually listen. Jimmy, I've been in this business long enough to understand how the game works. I get that controversy drives clicks and that networks are always fishing for that viral moment. But what I also understand, what maybe gets forgotten, is that there's a real human cost when you turn someone's personal life into primetime spectacle. Kimmel didn't miss a beat. That's rich, he snapped, coming from someone who makes millions playing pretend. I didn't flinch. Acting isn't pretending, I told him. It's about finding something real even if it's wrapped in fiction. Which is more than I can say for what's happening here tonight. That one hit its mark. His face reddened and you could see it, he was losing his grip on the situation. What started as a standard late-night segment had morphed into something else entirely. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were locked in, eyes wide, caught in the middle of something raw and real. Well, Johnny, Kimmel said through clenched teeth, maybe if you put half as much effort into preparing for interviews as you do rambling about truth and meaning, we could have had a more productive conversation. I came prepared to talk about the film, I replied simply. You clearly had other plans. The air between us got real quiet. I'd basically called him out on his own stage, and he knew it. Let me make one thing crystal clear, he said, and the warmth in his voice was gone. This is my show. It's got my name on it. I run the conversation. And that, I said, looking him straight in the eye, is exactly the problem with how entertainment works today. Somewhere along the way, folks started thinking that power means you don't need to show respect. Or integrity. That landed hard. You could hear gasps across the room. His producer was now fully in damage control, frantically signaling from the wings, drawing a hand across his throat, the classic cut sign. But Kimmel was too far in now. He ignored all of it. You want to talk about integrity? He snapped, his voice raised now. That's rich coming from you, considering your past. The whole studio fell into an uneasy silence. Even the band had stopped playing, just dead air and tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My past, I said quietly, giving a slow nod. I've never once claimed to be perfect. But here's the difference, Jimmy, I don't sit up here pretending to welcome people while secretly judging them. I show up honest. Kimmel looked like he was barely keeping himself together. His jaw was tight, his hands twitching. Don't you dare lecture me about hospitality, he snapped. You think you can just come on my show? Shh. There it is again, I cut in, still calm. That's the third time you've said my show. Starting to think that might be the root of the problem. You could have heard a pin drop. This wasn't your usual late-night dust-up. This was something different, unscripted, unfiltered, and way too real for television. What are you getting at? He demanded, the charm completely gone now. I'm not hinting at anything, I said. I'm saying it plain. There's a line between having a conversation and setting someone up. Between asking questions and picking a fight. Between making entertainment and exploiting someone's life. That was it. The gloves were off. Kimmel jabbed a finger at me. You don't get to dictate how this works. We brought you on as a favor. A favor? I said, almost laughing. Is that what we're calling this circus? His producer ran onto the stage at that point, trying to calm things down, whispering frantically in Kimmel's ear. But Kimmel shook him off like a dog shaking off water. You know what, Johnny? He said, turning back toward the camera. We're done here. Let's go to break. Maybe our next guest will actually appreciate the opportunity. I didn't move. No anger. Just a calm, steady presence. That's a shame, Jimmy. I would have loved to shine a light on the hard work of the cast and crew who gave everything to this film. Security, he barked suddenly, waving toward the wings. Please escort Mr. Depp off the stage. You could hear the entire audience gasp. 2 security guards stepped into the spotlight, clearly uncomfortable, like they didn't know if this was real or a skit gone sideways. That won't be necessary, I said, rising slowly from the chair. I buttoned my jacket, looked around the room, and spoke directly to the people watching. I'm sorry we couldn't share more about the film tonight. It's a project full of heart, and I hope you'll support the folks who worked so hard on it. I gave a polite nod to the band, then one last look toward Kimmel, who was standing frozen in place, his face a storm of frustration. Without another word, I walked off stage. Cut to commercial, he yelled, ripping the mic off his jacket. But the cameras kept rolling just a second too long enough for millions of viewers to catch one last image, Jimmy Kimmel storming off the opposite side of the set, still shouting at his crew. When the show finally came back from an extra-long commercial break, Kimmel looked like he'd pulled himself together, but you could still see the tension all over him. He gave this dry, throwaway explanation about creative differences and then awkwardly jumped into a last-minute segment they clearly threw together just to kill time. But honestly, the damage had already been done. It didn't take long, just a few hours really, before clips of what went down started blowing up all over social media. Most people sided with Depp, saying his calm, thoughtful replies stood in sharp contrast to how hostile Kimmel had gotten. The whole thing peeled back a layer of late-night TV that most folks never get to see, all the rehearsed charm, the fake casual talk, and the oversized egos hiding behind what we're supposed to believe is just friendly banter. For Depp, weirdly enough, the whole mess kind of worked in his favor. It backed up what his fans had been saying for years, that the guy isn't just some tabloid punchline. He's a serious artist who won't let himself get dragged into being just another clickbait headline, even if that means passing up on some big publicity. Kimmel, on the other hand, got hit with backlash fast and hard. The network scrambled to hold emergency meetings, and a bunch of sponsors started freaking out. No one wanted to be tied to what was quickly being called an ambush on a guest who had come on the show in good faith. What started out as a stunt to bump up ratings backfired in a big way. Instead of being just another edgy moment for viral clips, it pulled back the curtain on the darker side of celebrity culture and the media machine that cashes in on it. By staying calm and not lowering himself to the same aggressive tone, Depp accidentally shined a light on the cracks in an industry that seems to think stirring up drama counts as real content. And that tension is the same thing as conversation. If this story gave you a little peek into the real engine behind entertainment media, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There are a lot of people in the business who'd rather you not hear stories like this, but we're here to tell it straight. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below. If you were in Johnny Depp's shoes, would you have kept your cool and walked away, or pushed back harder? Your take helps us figure out which stories really matter to you.